Hey guys, this is Scarlet, and I actually have a few artifacts, but they're all under the same theme, and they're books that have had an impact throughout different stages of my life, and they've pretty much have influenced either the way I thought or they're very reflective of how I was at the time. So we'll briefly start with the very young childhood set of books, and it's a few of them right there. The very first of which is A Bargain for Frances. So this is a book that originally was published in the 70s. I received a copy from one of my teachers. I think I must have been in the probably second or third grade at the time. And it was the first book I actually got as a gift, so it made an impression on me. And when I was very young, I met, well, it's the best way of putting it. I met my father and my stepmother later in life, so I didn't have too many memories of them at first. And whenever I would visit them, it was an uncomfortable experience, especially when I stayed overnight. So I would always bring this book with me, and I would beg my stepmom to read it, and she was always kind enough to oblige. So I have a lot of fond memories of just the stories and the characters, especially Frances, who was very outgoing and far too smart for her age, to be frank. So this book always made me laugh and brought a lot of peace when I was visiting those people at the time. And I fell in love with this book in particular very much that I ended up getting into the entire series. And as an adult, I purchased this copy and a collection I managed to find on Amazon. And this just has a series of short stories featuring Frances. And each one is as wonderful as the last. And they're very lighthearted and sweet. So if anyone has any children, or especially young girls, I really recommend this series. Frances is the best. So much so, I have a lot of fond memories of her and this whole collection that I have a tattoo. If we ever meet in person, you will most likely see it. It's right on my arm. And that's just a commemoration of the joy I had whenever I read the stories and they were read to me. And the rest in this little section includes favorites like The Red Hand, and I'm sure everyone remembers Where the Sidewalk Ends. Again, I bought all of these books as an adult just because I loved them so much when I was a kid. It was great to find copies and just revisit them whenever I have my nieces over, or I used to read them to my little brother as well when he was growing up. Speaking of which, this is actually his favorite book. He's still very young. He's only 12. But this was the book, this was his version of Frances. He would make me reread this book to him all the time. So I made sure to keep his copy, and this also has like very fond memories for me. And it's just a silly story. It's a silly story about a rhino who smashes a peanut butter sandwich on his butt. It really reflects my brother's humor, and I love it. The next section, we are moving on to my preteen and teen years. And in case you are close to millennials age, you would know right away that I was definitely an emo growing up, at least during my teen years. Hence, the Tim Burton collection, Christmas collection, and Tales of Edgar Allan Poe, must-haves if you're going to be an emo in the early 2000s. And this is a Doctor Who fairy tale book, and Doctor Who is a British sci-fi series that is about a time-traveling space alien. So I know it sounds pretty crazy, But if you've seen this series, then I'm sure you love it as much as I do. If you have not seen it, it's very funky, and I suggest you give it a try. And I also have a tattoo that commemorates that series and that time of my life. And that's just a Weeping Angel, which is a main character. Well, sort of a main character in the series. It's definitely an iconic one. Okay, and then we're going to move on to this last stack. And I kept it brief just so I don't have to divulge too much of my life story. In my late teens and early adulthood, probably like 19, 20, 21, I became obsessed, well, even more obsessed with poetry. And I used to love reading all types of poems, from classic poets to more modern ones. Whenever I went to thrift shops, I would pick up poem books and just flip through the pages and find random ones that I loved. My mom actually found, which one? Found this one in a thrift shop, and she was kind enough to pick it up for me when I was about 19. So since then I have like flipped through every page and have marked down the poems that I love, which, to be frank, it's like practically every other page anyways. Later on, I made sure to get the newest edition, so I've read through most of that as well. And I still continue my poem searches, and I'm always open for suggestions. If you have any poets you like, send them my way. If you're looking for anything more modern, I highly recommend Jessica Saldago, and she's a Salvadorian poet. She has a series of books that are reflective of her experiences and a little more around heartbreak. So it's a nice and fun read sometimes. Anywho, these are my artifacts. They each hold a very dear place in my heart, and they reflect different times in my life. And to be a little more honest, there should be one more stack, but the last stack that reflects what I read now is very, very business oriented and school oriented. So it's not as fun to talk about. But yeah, those tend to be very leadership oriented books. And anyways, so these are my artifacts. I hope you enjoyed, and bye.